to tell you a story of what we see happening in health and nutrition. It's remains an absolutely huge topic, of course. Just looking at this from a very a top level, there's a lot of things happening, right? I think the world has never been maybe more stressful, more chaotic in a very long time. I think a lot of younger consumers have never seen it like this. But we know that healthcare systems are under pressure. We know there's a lot of changes. GLP-1 is something that we hear a lot. I was at another event last week, and of course, huge focus on GLP-1. Healthy aging. I think very soon we're getting to a position, especially in the United States, where there's more boomers than Gen Z, for example. So it's we're getting older populations, not only in the U.S., but in many parts of the world. A lot more discussion about preventative health. Again, social media absolutely packed, with all kinds of things. It's come up as a topic more today, but people are trying to be a bit more proactive when it comes to managing their health. Regulation is the fastest driver of a trend, if you want to call it that. So there's absolutely some changes and regulations, especially in the U.S., that's putting a spotlight on some topics. And of course, we all now are wearing little things like this that help us to find more personalized solutions for our health needs. So the things that people are concerned about, you can see it's about equally split. This is a survey. I'm mostly going to be talking about global today. And when we talk about global, we do a big survey across 11 countries. So 2 countries per region, one country extra and one, but that's the US, Mexico, Brazil, UK, Germany, France, China. I have to think of Indonesia. But so it's big countries. So this is a really big survey. 14,000 people. So when I talk about globally, just so you know, every region is represented. But you can see it's pretty equally split. People are super stressed out, and they're feeling it mentally, and they're have physical concerns as well. And again, if you look at younger consumers, the Gen Z and millennials, you can see they're worried, they're stressed, they have a lot of anxiety. As a parent of 3 Gen Z kids, you hear about this all the time. They definitely worry, I think, more about things than I did when I was at the same age. And then, of course, when you get a bit older, you worry about sleep and your weight. So there's a lot of generational differences. So when I talk about trends like this, sometimes I think people are going, yeah, but it's different in my country. And you can always drill down, right? There's lots of differences. So I will address that where I can today. So then we also ask consumers, what do they do in the past 12 months to improve their mental health or their physical well-being? And I think there's a couple of interesting things on this slide. So you can see where diet shows up in either one of them, but you also see physical activity in position number 2 at the top, position number 1 at the bottom. You see sleep up there really high up. People also eat a lot of food and take a lot of supplements to help with those things as well. So even though food might show up later in the list, food is definitely related to a lot of things across this list. But it comes down to the basic things: sleep, exercise. I think simplifying your life is interesting. That also comes to cooking. I heard somebody on a podcast last week. He said, like, the things that he does for his mental health, one of the things he mentioned was clean eating and lots of sleep and drinking less alcohol. So you're going to see these things come up as well. So food is related, even though food is specifically related in these things, food is related to many things on this topic. It's an absolutely key part of what people think about to manage their health. So the trends that we're going to look at today, we're going to look at natural wellness. So of course, we all know this has been an absolutely massive topic for a long time. Weight shift. I think this is interesting. If I go back maybe 10 or 15 years, we talked about satiety all the time. And then satiety kind of went away because we got clean label. We had a big recession. We started thinking about other things. And now weight loss is absolutely back. I think Ozempic is part of the reason for that, but people are talking about it more. Positive aging, of course, I can relate to that. Her health. We know that women have been very understudied, underrepresented. I think women were only included in clinical trials starting in 1990 because they were seen as too complicated. If they were pregnant, that was another complication. The hormones are too complicated. So I would say this is just women catching up. Women are catching up in a lot of different ways, but also when it comes to this whole focus on health, there's a lot of attention on women. And then we can finally talk about our mental health. So even if we've been feeling it a long time, we can now talk about it. So we're going to dive into each one of those one by one. So first, we're going to talk about natural wellness. I mentioned that I think the first time I heard somebody talk about kitchen cupboard ingredients was 2005 or so. I was at a meeting in the UK. I'm going to turn on my timer so I don't talk too long. And I remember somebody talking. It's the first time I'd heard somebody talking about clean label. And then I think we had a couple of things happen. We had a lot of regulatory crackdown, especially in Europe. EFSA cracked down on all the health claims that were really out of control. And then we had a huge recession. And then I think people are always looking for safety when it comes to a recession. And so that absolutely really drove everything around natural and clean label for a long time. But you can see it sticks, right? So there's a lot of interest in things. COVID also brought up a lot of things around health, but still people really attracted to inherent nutrition. And it also it seems to be something that sticks a bit more than a lot of reliance on a lot of added ingredients, but they're still interested in interest in that as well. Reduction, of course, avoiding things like fat and sugar and so on. What I think is really interesting is the one down here in the bottom left, the 18% is around avoiding additives and preservatives. But if you listen to so much what we hear in the press and still on social media about, all the bad chemicals in food, I think most consumers don't really care. We did a report on demonized ingredients. Most people don't really care. And I don't want to focus too much on that, but natural is a really big driver of health and what people see as healthy. So here we asked consumers, what natural foods are you prioritizing? So of course, fruits and vegetables are kind of what everybody's always interested. Animal proteins, eggs, lean proteins, of course, which makes a lot of sense. Red meat is kind of under attack, but people still like it. It sells out every year. And then dairy products. But what's interesting is that still younger consumers over-index when it comes to interest in plant-based protein. So there is still, we're in this, it's a really long transition. This is not something that's, I would say, completely out or over. Again, there was a lot of hype around plant proteins, but it's a long transition, probably over 20 or 25 years. But younger consumers do see that as a plant-rich diets seem to be more natural in their perception than animal-based diets. And then drilling into that just a little bit to ask, what nutrients are you really looking for? So, of course, focusing on Gen Z and millennials again. Protein, vitamins, fiber still really high, but it under indexes a bit compared to some of the other age groups. And then looking at what you're trying to avoid, again, younger consumers, it will under index compared to older consumers, which is not a surprise. But still, about a third of consumers say I'm trying to limit added sugars, artificial sweeteners, saturated fats. So I think this just kind of validates what we kind of know, and there are some generational differences. So coming back to plant-based for a little while, this has been on we do a big top 10 trends every year. So our number 5 trend last year was rethinking plants, because plants are, for the past 15 years, again, we've been talking about everything plant-based. But if you look at the barrier that lack of naturalness or lack of perceived natural is for plant-based foods, in 2024, it's the number 5 barrier. In 2025, it's the number 3 barrier. So making them more natural has been very important. And you can see, again, as I said, that younger consumers do see they over-index for thinking it's better than some of the other generations. And then people still associate plant-based being healthier, and being about a third of consumers say it's also natural. So again, this will be something that young consumers are going to make happen in a bigger way than older consumers. Okay, let's talk about weight loss. So it is still so interesting to me that we didn't talk about it for such a long time, and now we're talking about it a lot. 50% of consumers say that weight management is a big concern to their physical health. And you can see you either have a problem or you're trying to prevent a problem. So about 2/3 say I have or had a problem and I want to improve my health. And about a third say I don't have a weight problem, but I do want to make sure I keep it that way. And then looking at what struggles are related to that. So of course, if you ask what are your biggest weight problems, being overweight, it's difficult to lose weight, I have excess body fat. For me, that's maybe the most interesting line on this slide, because again, if you look at what's happening in social media especially, you can still be overweight, but there are a lot of people focused on getting strong. So this can also be a driver for protein, It can be a driver for protein and fiber. And we also know that people that are on the GLP-1 drugs also, tend to lose their craving for sugar and alcohol. So that's also a driver for these nutrients. So this can represent a big opportunity. And it doesn't have to be everybody's a bodybuilder, but people can just be healthier. Still, the end goal is overall health, overall fitness, lose weight, and of course, improve your physical endurance. The GLP-1s, again, just massive. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. And what happens with the food industry. There are some interesting products being developed, but you can see that now globally, it's a lot more available than it was. It was made available in Ireland. I was there in March this year, and people were saying, oh, it's so expensive. I think it was like $200 a month to have it. It's a lot cheaper than a lot of other places if you have to pay for it out of pocket. So anyway, this is getting a lot more distribution around the world. Again, if you ask people, what are you doing to achieve your weight loss? Ozempic is quite low. I mean, there is still quite a big barrier to that, but it's same things we've seen everywhere else. Number one is exercise. Number two is reducing things like sugar in your diet, portion control. I think that's another interesting one as well. I still think there's certainly American consumers have lost any idea of what true portions are. That's something that I still think could be an opportunity. And then we have some up-to-date numbers on GLP usages, and we have seen an 80% increase this year over last year. And about 18% of Americans say now that they are on it. So again, that's just going to continue to grow. And again, this comes back to nutrient density. This is a great opportunity. I'm the optimistic American always, and I think that anybody who's been in the industry for 30 years knows it's been this huge discussion about how do you get consumers to eat better in a very mainstream kind of way. Maybe this is the catalyst, right? This is kind of starting to kick all this off, and there's the regulators always pushing back, and maybe this is our time to see it. So here we ask consumers, and it is amazing that we pretty easily found GLP-1 consumers to do research on. It wasn't that difficult. But if you look at what people say that they're eating differently, they're eating more protein, more vitamins and minerals, more fiber.